Hi, welcome to the Learning from Games series from Untold Play, where we look at games from all walks of life and see what we can learn from them that will help us to design and build learning games and to gamify learning experiences. Today's episode is all about Fantasy Premier League, or it could be about any fantasy football game. Now, don't worry if you're not a football fan, the ideas from this game can be applied to any kind of learning. So, you can see on the screen in front of you the setup for this game, which is a very unusual type of game in a way. So it's a game based on what's happening in real life. So the footballers that are on your screen are the footballers that I've picked for my fantasy football team from real life players who play in the Premiership. So Trent Alexander-Arnold here, for instance, plays for Liverpool. I've picked him for my team, which means that when Liverpool play a real life game, then he will score a certain number of points depending on how well he does in that game. And depending on all of those, for all of my players, depends on my score for that game week. So there are rules which I won't go into in too much depth about how you choose your players, how many players you can afford, and in particular about how you can transfer them in and out week by week, and about how many points they score. So you can see here that they're scoring points for all kinds of things like the amount of time that they play, or whether they score goals, or whether they score or miss a penalty, or anything like that. So each week I have my team. I can make some transfers. I can choose who plays and who's on the bench, as it were, so not playing. And then those players that I do pick and that play will score a certain number of points. And then those points go towards my score as a manager, as a player. And then we see how that works in terms of things like leagues. So this is a league that I've entered at the moment. You know, there's no data in there, but as soon as the season starts very soon, we'll get points each week, and that will contribute towards our total. And someone will be the leader, and someone will be second, and so on, all the way through the season until the end of the season. So things are happening in this kind of game layer that are based on things that happen in the real world that game layer sits on top of. So real life events, these football matches would be happening anyway. But in fact, what's happening now is me and the other people in my mini league and the other actually usually millions of players who are playing this game are actually basing our game results on these real life events that would be happening anyway, which is a really interesting concept. It's a bit different to a lot of the games that we've looked at so far in this series. So real life events are happening anyway. We're just putting a layer on top of them and saying that we're going to treat X as Y. We're going to treat when somebody scores a goal as a point or some kind of change in the game. So if you take that idea of a game layer, when a real life event happens, it has a game effect, then we can think about that for all kinds of things. It doesn't have to be football and football matches. I mean, I think fantasy football is the example that I've picked because I think it illustrates just how widespread and how popular it can be. You've got millions of players playing across the different fantasy football games each season. And obviously that's partly because football itself is very popular. But if we look at anything else, if we turn our attention to other things, we can think about what kind of real life events could prompt a game change, perhaps a score of some kind. So you're encouraging people within the game to evaluate real life situations and to predict what they think will happen and to make decisions, perhaps if they have decisions about which choice they're going to go for that's going to get them points, perhaps, or not get them points. And, you know, this uses football matches, but you could use anything. You could use a recording. For example, you could use a recording of a program like Dragon's Den, where if the people haven't watched it, then you could pause it at various points and ask them to think whose innovation do they think is more likely to be successful, or who's done the best job of influencing. So who's more likely to have swayed the panel of people who judge the innovations on the program Dragon's Den. So that's just one thought, one example. You could also do it with a kind of case study where you give a case study to people in stages. And again, they've got to pick out which person they think is going to do best or what kind of things are going to happen. And they get points on that base. So not exactly real life, but a real life type situation. You could do the same with actors acting out a scene and being paused. And then people in the learning experience have to choose what they think will happen or predict or make decisions, which again will have a game layer effect. Or any real life situation. It could be the movements of the stock market. It could be developments in business or in the news, anything like that. So, if you think about the kind of things that this could help teach about, it could perhaps be about talent management. You could look at how people progress in their careers based on various factors. You could think about innovation, as we said. You could think about projects and change and how successful they're going to be, or whether they're going to hit various metrics, whether they're going to be on time. And just kind of freewheeling ideas here just to hopefully inspire you. But the idea is that you can look around at anything, think about it as an event or a series of events that progresses, and your players, the people who are learning how to read and evaluate and predict and make decisions around that event, because the game layer that you've placed on top of it helps them to have motivation to make those choices and some feedback on which choices have been more successful. If you want to look around for other examples of the same, there are plenty of other fantasy games, not just around football. We can think in a way of kind of betting as an example of this, where people might go for a Grand National horse or something like that, or a sweepstake on the World Cup, and then you've got that kind of team to back, and you're cheering for that team. They're simple versions. There's a game you might have come across called BS Bingo. I'm not going to spell out the full name, where people, if they think that there's going to be a lot of corporate talk in a speech or presentation, they might have a little bingo card that they cross off each time somebody says a catchphrase. So these are all just examples and ideas to get the ball rolling. But this idea, which we're presenting to you today, is about this idea of a game layer where people score points based on events that happen, perhaps outside of their control, but they're predicting and evaluating and using those skills. So I hope that's prompted some ideas. I'd love to hear any ideas or any further discussion. Please let me know in the chat. Please subscribe to the channel and please look out for future episodes of Learning from Games. I've been Terry Pearce from Untold Play. Thank you very much.